Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. It's your DFS strategy video for the 2021 WGC FedEx St. Jude Invitational. Hopefully you had a chance to watch the preview video I put out last night because this video is going to be a continuation of that one basically. We'll grab a lot of the stuff that we learned in that one, apply it to this video, and really try to break down our player pools to a nice tight core to build our lineups around. So if you want to see what I'm covering in this video, I have timestamps in the description below. Those timestamps can also be found on YouTube's progress bar. All you gotta do is hover over the progress bar. You'll see them there. Skip to whatever part of the video you'd like. If you've not yet seen the preview video, I'll link video top right hand corner. Go ahead, check that one out first, and then come back here so you have an understanding of what we'll be covering. But let's go ahead and get right into this. So the very first thing that I like to look at is really the sweet spot score. Let me zoom in for you guys. Really, it's a sweet spot rank, but that rank is based off the sweet spot score. And from there, we'll look at our marquee tee time pairings. So let me show you how the score is first calculated to get the rank. I look at official world golf ranking stats. Basically, want to get the highest ranked, or the lowest ranked, I should say, whatever's closest to 1, to 9 or to 100. The score to 100. So Colin Morikawa, I think, is 4th. So obviously he has 99 points. Dustin Johnson is 2nd. He's got 99.33. Maybe Colin Morikawa's 3rd. He is 3rd. But you can see how just little difference there is. So DJ gets 0.33 points boosted to his score over Morikawa. So it's not a huge jump between those top guys, but obviously if we look at some of these guys down below, like Wilco Nienaber, 46.33. He's obviously lacking, like he's 40 points behind, 50 points behind Morikawa and Dustin Johnson. So that's a good way to separate those lower guys from the top guys. So we have official world golf ranking. Looking at grass stats, I didn't cover this in the preview video, so I will be doing it in the strategy video. It's Bermuda greens, so that's the only grass I'm looking at. The Zoysia really is only in the fairways. Bermuda's in the rough. So to me, it's mostly Bermuda you want to be looking at. So I have grass average, which is Bermuda average, and that dates back to 2013. My top 10 success rate, basically what the stat here reads, that also goes back to 2013. And I am trying to get the scores close to 100. I do now see that these scores are a little higher than 100. So I'm going to have to adjust that a little bit. But you can see, obviously, Morikawa and McIlroy are your top Bermuda guys. And then I'm also looking at 2021's Bermuda stat. I believe I actually have this. Or have, I should say. I have it. So basically, I do try to get it to 100, but then I divide it by 2. Because I don't really want this stat, especially when there's a golfer who's only golfed one Bermuda event and he has really good stats. That'll show up on here kind of in a negative way. So obviously I tone it back a little bit. And then I'm looking at tournament history, which is really course history. And obviously, again, I'm trying to get the scores close to 100. Those are your best golfers in the field. Bogey avoidance, birdie or better. These 3 stats here, DK average, recent form average, and scoring average, are all recent form stats. That's the last 8 weeks. I'm only looking at the last 8 weeks when I think of recent form. So that's what we have here. That's your DraftKings points. Obviously, recent form average is your finishing position, the average finishing position over the last 8 weeks. Scoring average, that is just all rounds of golf that have been golfed within those 8 weeks. And then I'm looking at season-long DK average and season-long scoring average, and then that creates a score, which then is ranked over in this column here. Why is this important? Well, first of all, it shows you who I like the most, really probably who I'm going to play the most, but the biggest thing, it determines our marquee tee time pairings. So first of all, let's just talk about the top 20. I'm not going to go super far in depth, but Colin Morikawa is my number 1 golfer, followed by Rory McIlroy. That's why the 2 golfers are on the thumbnail of this video. They are actually my favorite golfers this week as well. And that's kind of I wouldn't say like a scapegoat or a cheap way out, but I mean, their Bermuda stats are so good. How about that? Let's just talk about No, we'll talk about top 20. Then we'll talk about grass stats. No. Here, let me just go to it really quick. I'm sorry. I didn't envision doing this right now, but either way, Bermuda stats, like they have the best Bermuda stats. I mean, Dustin Johnson also has really good Bermuda stats. So those 3 golfers are your top golfers in this field with Bermuda, overall Bermuda. You can see the top 10 success rates for these golfers. I mean, both Rory and Colin Morikawa, over 50%, finishing inside the top 10. And then their 2021 Bermuda stats, super good. So that's a reason why I like that. And we will cover grass stats a little bit later in this video. But that's why they're my number 1, number 2 guys. Again, I'm not going over every one of these, but what I like to point out, this is a limited field. There's 66 golfers in the field, but still, I like to point out the guys that are in the 7K range within the top 20. Because obviously, some of these guys are beating out some 9K golfers or some 8K golfers. So Sung J Im, better than Patrick Cantlay, better than Patrick Reed, Joaquin Niemann. Same goes with Harris English, which is kind of a big surprise. A lot of people are on, what's his name? I am drawing Tyrrell Hatton. A lot of guys are on Tyrrell Hatton over Harris English. I mean, I have Harris English 11 points better in my ranking than Tyrrell Hatton. So take that for what it's worth. I think a lot of it just has to come down to Bermuda stats, and I don't think Hatton has as good as English, maybe? That's not true. So there's obviously something else in play that's making Harris English's score better than Hatton's. I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head. I guess we can look at the score this way. Another thing I wasn't envisioning doing, but so be it. I want to see the 2 golfers because a lot of people are going to be on Hatton this week. Let's try to make a good case for Harris English. Pretty much a dead heat with official world golf ranking. Same goes with Bermuda stats. Hatton gets a little bit of a bump with top 10 percentage. 2021 grass stats actually also go to Hatton. Let's see, tournament history a little bit goes towards English. Birdie or better goes to English. So obviously Hatton has been kind of struggling in that department. And recent form. Okay, so that's the big one. Recent form is where Hatton is, where English is getting most of his points on Hatton. Everything else pretty much a deadlock. So a little bit better grass stats for Hatton, better recent form stats for English. Obviously, let's see how their total score actually looks. So English is 40 points better when it comes to the score than Tyrrell Hatton. Anyways, just wanted to show you that. But our 20th golfer is Mr. Tommy Fleetwood at $8,000. So the only two 7K golfers are English and Im within the top 20, but everyone else is 8K and above. And obviously your 10K guys are up there. Jordan Spieth is the lowest 10K golfer. Just throwing that one out there. But yeah, the rest of them up at the top. Morikawa number 1, then McIlroy for me, then JT, Xander, DJ, and Brooks. Like I like all these golfers up here. Really like Simpson. I think a lot of people are gonna be liking Simpson this week, but I mean, I think it's a good cause, or not so much a good cause, but it's reasonable to me. Like it makes sense. It's logical. He's rating out well. Maybe the recent form isn't as good, but still he is the number 9th ranked golfer in my scoring. And really my scoring has no subjective matter to it whatsoever other than the stats that I use to create the score. And it's pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost every single week it's the same how I create the score. So I'm not changing it to better fill my wants and needs, I guess, if you want to call it that. Like, I'm not saying I like Rory and then trying to get a score to be high so you guys like him. That's just how it goes with the scoring that I use week in and week out. So anyways, with that ranking, I like to use that for the Marquee Tee Time pairings. So let me go ahead and filter this out by color. This will give us our marquee tee time pairings. And just to throw it out to you guys, I mean, I'm going to highlight these every third golfer because that obviously marks the group. We have 5 groups to look at. Let me give you a little background on why I go over this. So I've started doing this, I think, around the US Open. I have 5 tournaments for you guys to look at with me, and they all have the filters on them already based off of the group that they're in. The little black tick marks indicate the optimal lineup. So as we go through each of these tournaments, you want to be searching for this black tick mark. The light blue is the golfers in the GPP winning lineup. So I do keep that also for you guys to be able to see and track. So we're here looking at the Olympic golf. 2 of our golfers in the optimal lineup. And there were 5 groups here as well. Mind you, that was a limited field event. The strength of field wasn't that good, 327. I mean, a lot of that is because only so many golfers qualified for it for each country. Like obviously, if you take America had 4 golfers that were able to qualify for it. Some people declined to go. I think DJ was one of them. I don't know if it was Brooks or not, but either way, only 4 golfers from the U.S. I mean, the U.S. has several top 100 golfers in the world that would play for America. So they can't. You have to bring in someone like a Rory Sabatini from Slovakia, a CT Pan from Chinese Taipei, and all that other stuff. So anyways, I don't want to go too long down that road, but that's why the strength of field isn't as great. 327 for the Olympic golf, 700 for the WGC FedEx St. Jude. So just keep that in mind. Either way, we do have 2 golfers here in the optimal lineup. We go to the 3M Open, and honestly, the 3M Open kind of disappointed. We don't have 2 optimal lineup golfers, but we do have 2 GPP winning lineup golfers. So these are 2 golfers that were in that GPP winning lineup. We do have 1 optimal lineup golfer, and that was Louis Oosthuizen. But obviously, you can see how everything looks out. Really only 2 groups that produce a top 10. The rest of them pretty poor. And honestly, the 3M Open, that's this tournament that we're looking at, this was the biggest disappointment. This is the only time marquee tee times did not work. Go to the Open Championship. Let me zoom in for you guys. I believe there were 9 groups. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 groups. We do have 2 of the optimal lineup golfers in it, as well as 2 of the GPP winning lineup golfers in it. And a pretty good top 20. Each group did their job to create a top 20 golfer. It wasn't all of them, all but 3 groups produced a top 20 golfer. But either way, we had 2 there. Look at the John Deere Classic. We only had 5. We really only had 4 groups. The golfers here in red that did not count. And I explained that in that John Deere video. But either way, we have 2 optimal lineup golfers here in Kevin Na and Sebastian Munoz. And then the Rocket Mortgage Classic, we only had 4 groups to talk about. And we had 2 optimal lineup golfers as well as 2 GPP winning lineup golfers. So that's kind of the back story of all of the optimal lineups. I just wanted to go over that so you guys kind of understand where I'm getting at. We have 5 groups this week. Strength of field 723. One other thing I forgot to mention throughout that as we're going through, a lot of 9K golfers were the optimal lineups in those marquee tee time pairings. Not all of them. One, I think the Olympic golf, I just closed all those windows, but the Olympic golf, I think, had 2 10K golfers that made up the optimal lineup. We also saw one with a 9 and an 8. So that's kind of the other piece to look at. You know, how do we want to pick 2 golfers from this group of golfers. I have a very high confidence that these marquee tee time pairings are going to produce at least 2 optimal lineup golfers. I know I'm jumping a little bit here. I'm gonna add a piece. I forgot to mention how marquee tee time pairings are created. We use the rank over here add up the 3 scores in that pairing, and if it's under 2/3 of the amount of golfers, so there's 66 in the field, 2/3 equals 44 of that 66. If that score is under 44, they get highlighted. So obviously 7 plus 8 is 15, plus 17 is 32. So that gets highlighted. And I do that with each of these groups. That's how we find the marquee tee time pairings week in and week out. So if it's a 156-man field, we're looking at 104 golfers. If it's a 132-man field, I don't know, it's something like 87, 88. I can't remember the exact number. But we're looking kind of at the 2/3 mark. And Mr. Guru Nick kind of helped me out with that. I thought that was a good idea to start there. But either way, that's how they're highlighted. That's how we're looking at it. My 2 golfers that I like, Rory and Colin, could be paired together. And I think you could do a stars and scrubs lineup. So I will be kind of looking at doing something like that, going with Rory and Colin. Now, if you wanted to take the route of picking 2 9K golfers, you have the opportunity, several avenues. You go Justin Thomas in this group, Matsuyama in this one, Bryson, and anyone in that first group. So my only rule of thumb is don't pick a golfer within the group that you're choosing one of the other guys. So case in point, if I want Louis, I'm just going to stay away from Victor Hovland or Patrick Cantlay. As you saw throughout all of those marquee tee time pairings, we did not see, multiple golfers from the same group in the optimal lineup, in the GPP winning lineup. Sure, we saw some that had top 20, top 10 finishes, but they just weren't in the optimal lineup. And that's what we're trying to strive for in doing these strategy videos, trying to create the optimal lineup. So either way, that is how I would do it. Same applies for 10K golfers. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me how you're pairing them up. Just try to stay away from grabbing golfers from the same group. So we will come back to this. We'll select golfers when we build lineups a little bit later from the marquee tee time pairings. But I'm going to go ahead and open this back up. I appreciate you sticking around, listening to that whole explanation. Kind of went a little in depth there, but I think it's worth it. I always like to inform you guys how I'm coming up with things, maybe provide you guys some nuggets to think about, that kind of stuff. But from here, what I want to do is look at the anchor buckets. So basically what I do, and by the way, no. I almost forgot. We're going to look at grass stats first. Which is fine, because I think that's a good place to kind of transition from marquee tee time pairings. So let's go ahead and sort this overall. So like Garrick Higo has 1 event under his belt, and that was the Palmetto Championship in South Carolina. Obviously won it, has 100% top 10 percentage. He's kind of skewing the colors that are created here, because Colin Morikawa and Rory McIlroy would have this dark green for their top 10 percentage, because they're above and beyond the other golfers that are in this field. But anyways, Higo, Nienaber, and Rye all have 1 event under their belt, which is not enough. I usually like to just exclude anyone that has less than 4 events under their belt to determine who the best Bermuda golfers are. But you can see it's Morikawa, it's DJ, Rory, there's Webb. Again, a lot of people are going to be on Webb. He's really good at Bermuda. Scotty Scheffler, JT, Victor Hovland, Tommy Fleetwood, Patrick Cantlay. And I'm not going to go over all of them, but you can see every one of them on the screen. Yeah, it just makes me like Morikawa. It makes me like Rory more. And now it kind of gets me a little bit on DJ, because I wasn't necessarily on DJ before. Just like many of the people in the industry, hard to get around to that. But either way, his Bermuda stats, pretty darn good. And when we look at top 10 percentage, this is your success rate of finishing inside the top 10. Morikawa and Rory are in a league of their own. You can exclude Higo from this because, again, he only has 1 event under his belt. But either way, these guys are 13, 17 points above the next golfer, and that's Dustin. Dustin, JT, Webb, they're all in that 40 percentile, or I shouldn't say percentile, but 40% and above. But then we have Sergio, who does really well on Bermuda tracks. And I'm sure he's going to be used quite a bit. We have Fleetwood, Rose. Like Fleetwood, to me, this is a good spot for him because I mean, I think a lot of people just like Tommy Fleetwood because of he's just a likable character, a likable guy. You know what? Maybe I could be wrong on this now that I think about it, because I don't think many people realize that Fleetwood's best surface is Bermuda. We all play him on POA, we all play him on bent, only to get, our expectations shattered in a way. So I think this is a good spot for Fleetwood. Anyways, a lot of good golfers up here. We do have Kevin Kisner in the 6K range. He's the only golfer to represent the 6K range, kind of in this top 20 of success rates, Bermuda success rates. So, if you're looking for someone to fill in your lineup that's down there in 6K range, Kevin Kisner, I think, is a good choice. And then when we look at 2021 Bermuda stats, this also can be skewed in a way. Like the Bermuda events you see here are just overall. This dates back to 2013. So I can't show you how many events have been played in 2021. But I will say this. When we do usually look at reviews of our past videos, that year's Bermuda stat or that year's grass stat has a lot of success of finishing inside the top 20. So I would not shy away from looking at a stat like this, even if they've only played one event or maybe only played 2-3 events. 2021 Bermuda stats, I think, are a good one to look at, especially more recent stats. So either way, I mean, you have Higo again, he won, and then you have Morikawa and McIlroy up there at the top, and then surprise, surprise, Bryson DeChambeau. Not a lot is talked about his Bermuda stats, but 32% success rate finishing inside the top 10, that's pretty darn good. So yeah, 9.5, he might be a good pivot from like a JT or even a Daniel Berger or a Victor Hovland, which I think are going to probably have a little bit more ownership this week. Yeah, I don't see really any. I would get rid of the guys that only have one event under the belt. Just I know I said, it's okay to look at 1, 2, or 3, but if you're really looking for consistency, I think you want to look at these golfers here. The ones that I just got rid of, very inconsistent, volatile. Like I wouldn't trust Garrick Higo to play well again. He just came from the Olympics where he did not play well. But hey, I could be wrong. He could be the Tom Lewis of last year, finishing well, a European golfer that finishes well here in the 6K range. So, use your judgment. But either way, here are your top 2021 Bermuda golfers. And it's really Rory, Colin at the top. You could add DeChambeau, but then it drops from there. So those are your 3 golfers to really look at and try to determine if you want to play those guys. So let's go ahead and now go into, our anchor buckets. So what I like to do is really, I started looking at top 5 frequencies and trying to find a minimum. So I get rid of all the zeros. And really what the minimum tells me is this is the amount of times that this bucket has finished inside the top 10 of every year that I've tracked these data points. So last year ones, golfers who had not played in this tournament, every single year there's at least 2 that finish inside the top 5. Course history, that's obviously self-explanatory, but the 1 to 20 range, so those that have a top 20 course history at this tournament, I shouldn't even say top 20 that way. They have an average finishing position between 1 to 20 at this event. That bucket has also seen at least 1 every single year inside the top 5. So I usually like to go here, but we only have 2 buckets. And I actually don't mind that. We can start here. But what I'm going to do is open it up and look at our top 10. So let me do that now because obviously it's going to include our top 5. Let's go ahead and get rid of the zeros. You can see we have a few more groups we can talk about, but then we can go ahead and also close this down. And we can still have the same golfers that we had before. Yeah. Okay. So when we look at this, obviously we're looking at last year ones, golfers who did not play. Let's go by salary. And we don't have anyone that's 8K and above. Everyone is 7K and below. We have 2 golfers that are in that Marquee tee time pairing. So maybe if you are interested in starting here, Harris English, not a bad choice. Justin Rose, not a bad choice. I'm probably going to be, I'm a little lukewarm on Justin Rose. I don't care to really play him. I think this is where we're going to find our 6K golfers. I did a little bit of research prior to. Like 2019 is not really a good one to go by, but if we look at 2018 and we look at our golfers here, I mean, we have an 11K golfer, a 7K golfer, 7, 7. So obviously that's a good sign because we're kind of wanting our 7s, right? 2020, which I think is a good one to look at, we have Lewis that's 6'2", Berger that's 9'6", and Lowry that's 6K or 6'6". And those are golfers, again, inside the top 10, and that's really all I'm looking at. Not going to look at 2019 because that was the first year it changed to a WGC. Many golfers came over here that did not play. We already looked at 2018, but if we look at 2017, we have a 7K, 8K, 8, 9, 6, 6. Okay, so a lot of golfers. 7K, 6K, I think that's where we want to be selecting our golfers, and that's kind of why I'm going over this, is just to show you what the salaries were for some of those other years that this tournament's been held. So when we look at this, obviously we have a few 7K golfers we can choose from. Again, I don't have an issue starting with your Marquee tee time pairings. Like with Harris English and Justin Rose. And again, we know that because we see the color over here under their SS rank. So their sweet spot rank. I don't really have a golfer that I absolutely am in love with, but I do like English. I like Zalatoris. I don't care for Rose. I like Harmon and Scott, Burns, Ortiz, Westwood, Sink. I think those are really the only guys. I guess we could look at their Bermuda stats just to double check on this. Rose has some really good Bermuda stats, so maybe we should probably consider, except for his 2021 Bermuda, so keep that in mind. We do see Garrick Higo, who obviously has the best, Bermuda stats because of his one finish that was a win. But yeah, I'm not too concerned about that. Yeah, the golfers that I did highlight, I like considerably. I have no issues with that. So again, Zalatoris, English, Harmon, Scott, Burns, Davis. I didn't say Davis. Burns, Ortiz, Westwood, Sink. I like those golfers. So that's kind of how I would approach it. And then obviously our course history ones were the other bucket to look at. And this is your average finishing position for this event inside the top 20. So 1 to 20, somewhere in there. And we have most of our golfers in the 8K and above range, which kind of makes sense. I'd assume most of your, good golfers at this event will keep coming back and are top 50 in the world. Because obviously with the WGC event, you'll need that. This won't be a WGC event next year. I just found that out today. It will be a part of the playoffs. So keep that in mind. But anyways, we have Morikawa, Brooks, DJ, Justin Thomas, Louis. Those are all golfers we already talked about, especially with the Marquee tee time pairings. You can see that here. The only other golfer in that Marquee tee time pairing is Justin Rose. And guess what? We just talked about him in the last year bucket. So he's kind of correlating with those two buckets. Those are two anchor buckets, and he has both of those buckets under his... I should create a name for all of these statistics. Stat categories, really. But either way, he has the two that we are looking for, the anchor buckets. So perhaps that's a good reason to play Justin Rose. I don't really care for that. I'm not a huge proponent. The more anchor buckets they have within their profile, let's just call it their profile, for this tournament, just the better chances that they finish inside the top 10. It's not a guarantee. So let's just nip that in the bud right now. Just makes me like Colin Morikawa more, makes me like DJ more. And really, I'm going to play Brooks. I'll play JT. I'll play Louis. I don't care for the rest of these guys, but they will fill in here and there. So that'd be a short anchor bucket if we were only talking about those. But we can open this up to all top 10 golfers just to talk about a few more. Actually, I'm going to close this off to the other ones that we just talked about. So now, I don't talk about salaries, so I'm not going to do that. Now we're looking at recent Form 1s, recent Form 2s, and last week 2s. Last week 2s are golfers who missed the cut, so that's not doable. We can go ahead and remove the 0 in that case. So now it's just really 2 buckets. Recent Form 2 and recent Form 1. So we can go look at those golfers. We'll go with the recent Form 1 first. It's a small bucket, and it's headed by Webb Simpson, $8,500. Now, your recent Form Bucket 1 golfers have that 60 to 80 average finishing position over the last 7 weeks. That's usually not good, but I will say this, in every single tournament, a golfer from this bucket finishes inside the top 10. It's usually a volume-driven bucket, and that's kind of what I would imagine is the reason why this is so good. But I do have to admit, the projections that I have, I wouldn't talk about it if this was less than 1. But we haven't had a reason for me to bring that up other than right now. So if this was underneath 1, my projection, I wouldn't talk about it. But I am forecasting at least 1 golfer from this bucket to finish inside the top 10. It's a small bucket. If you like any of these guys, anchor your lineups around them. Like I said before, I like Stuart Sink, I like Carlos Ortiz, and I like Webb. I am lukewarm on Horschel, Mickelson, Siwoo, and KH Lee, and a little bit of me wants to play Martin Laird. I think a lot of people are jumping to Jim Herman. I think Laird is actually a pretty decent pivot. So just throwing that out there. But yeah, this bucket is small. It's really not full of, elite golfers, but Webb Simpson could be that guy that can finish strong here. And then the last really anchor bucket, and we really don't have to talk about it anymore, is the recent Form 2s. And these are golfers that are a little bit better than those recent Form 1s when it comes to recent form, where this is your 40 to 60 range when it comes to recent form. So over the last 8 weeks, their average finishing position was somewhere between 40 and 60, which, again, not good on paper, but also almost every single tournament, we see 1 inside the top 10. So that's why it's worth mentioning. It's worth talking. That's why the bucket system is so good, to get you guys on some of these guys that you probably wouldn't because you're too afraid to play someone with poor recent form. But either way, we have Bryson DeChambeau. We have Tony Finau, which I'm very kind of bearish. Like I'm put off by Tony Finau at this event. Bermuda, not the grass stat that he's good at. So just keep that in mind. And I'd rather play the golfers underneath him or even Bryson DeChambeau. Like I don't care for Matt Fitzpatrick, but I do like Abraham Ancer. I like Kokrak. Leishman has good Bermuda stats. Keep that in mind. There we go with Justin Rose. This makes 3 anchor buckets now that he has in his profile for this tournament. Keep that in mind. And really, it's the only buckets that we can even talk about. So he has all of the anchor buckets under his, I'm just going to call it under his command. So that's interesting. I didn't like Justin Rose prior to doing this video, and now that I'm talking a little bit more about him, I don't mind him at 7K. I think you could do far worse. So, yeah, I think I'll play some Justin Rose. Sam Burns is here, Matt Wolff, Max Homa. These are all, to me, very volatile golfers. It looks like Burns is pretty decent on Bermuda, so keep that in mind, as is Westwood and Na down here in the 6K range. I'm just looking really at the top 10 Bermuda percentage. Again, that's your success rate on Bermuda to finishing inside the top 10. 25% is pretty good, pretty darn good. Same with just above 20. So looks good there. The rest of these guys, I would just kind of stay away from. I don't think it's really necessary to play any of them. But if you do, by all means, this is an anchor bucket. So any golfer in here is live. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I think that's going to conclude. Again, we don't talk about salary buckets, but you can see 10K and 8K. Those are pretty decent salaries to talk about. Open this back up. Actually, hold on. Let's grab these ones back just to show you what the other ones that we talked about. I also don't really look at strokes gained stats. Not for anchor buckets. I do in general, but just not for anchor buckets. So yeah, we had 4 anchor buckets to talk about. Last year ones, course history ones, recent form 2s, and recent form 1s. I'm pretty excited this week because my projections, I found a really good way to look at this. And it's been on my mind that I've wanted to try to figure this out. And this morning, for whatever reason, I just kind of stared at it and I was like, I think I know how to do this. And so then I put the formula to work and it spit out basically what I wanted to see. So what I'm doing, if you can follow me with this, when I project this, if I go and look at, yeah, I guess you really can't see what it looks like. I do something like this. Okay, so I'm gonna grab this one here just so it's in the middle. So I'm looking at strength of field. I'm also looking at the golfers, like how many are in each of their buckets. What is the success rate of that bucket? And then what is the strength of field for that bucket? And based off that, I compare them against each other. So for each stat category. So when I say that, like I'm only looking at last year ones when I'm creating these projections. We're not looking at any of the other buckets. We're just looking at the last year buckets. And if I said last year one, I just meant last year buckets. We're looking at success rate again. I already went through that. But we're comparing it to each of the other buckets in this stat category. With that, that's how we create the projections. So we're taking into account strength of field. We're taking into account success rate. And we're taking into account how many golfers are in that bucket this week. I can't think of a better way to create projections based off of that. Like it just, to me, it doesn't get any better. So I'm pretty excited. I want to see how this works out. So I have my projections, and hopefully when we're going through that or through the buckets, even in the preview video. Actually, no, the preview video does not have the updated one, so don't go there and look for the projections. But let me just open this up, I guess, and sort. Oh shoot. Can't sort by recent form, or I can't sort by this because there's live formulas in each one of these. So let me go ahead and just say greater than or equal to 3. There, it kind of cuts it down a little bit. But yeah, this would say we're looking at least 3 golfers that finish inside the top 10 for each of these stats. So your last year bucket 2s, really, it's the only bucket within the last year stat category that has a projection over 3. Those are your golfers that finished first to 20 last year at this tournament. So load up on those guys. Same thing applies for last week 3s and last week 1s, golfers who didn't play last week, or golfers who topped 20 last week. So, your Xanders, your Morikawas, Rory, like those are golfers that I think you should also try to get. And you can see when we add those 2 up together in the last week column or the last week stat, their projection is 8.39. Now, I look at top 10. We can only build lineups based off of 6 golfers in our lineup. So keep that in mind, but the projections are still legit because, again, I'm looking at the top 10. You can never have less than 10. We can have more than 10. But I cut it off at 10. So 10 is going to be when we add up all of the projections in each of the buckets or each of the stat categories, they should all equal 10. Should all add up to 10. So anyways, yeah, last week 3s and last week 1s. Want to load up on those golfers. Course history 1 and course history 3. Course history 1 are your top course history that has average finishing position 1 to 20. That's your number 1 bucket. We're projecting around 3.48. Course history 3, 20 to 40. So it's your best course history guys at this event. So keep that in mind. I think that's where we should anchor our lineups around as well. Recent form 3s, I'm projecting around 3. So in a way, this could be your anchor buckets as well. So that's kind of why I mentioned it. I do want to bring up one more thing, and I know I'm kind of hammering down the anchor buckets quite a bit. That's why we have timestamps. So if you want to skip ahead, be my guest. But one thing I noticed, so if we look at 2019, we don't have a lot of golfers that even played the year before, because in 2018, this was a full field event. It wasn't a WGC event, so we didn't have a lot of the golfers coming through. So if we even put a filter on this so you can see all the top price guys, you know, DJ, Brooks, Phil, Henrik Stenson, Daniel Berger are your 10K and above golfers. I wish that I had strength of field, like what they contributed, so you can see, you know, at that time what we would have expected from them. But the fact that we see Phil up there at 10.6, like, that's kind of odd. Primarily because, I mean, 2018 is not that long ago. Phil just qualified for, I shouldn't say qualified, but he can play in the Champions Tour now because he's that old. Having him at 10.6, that's kind of crazy. And I don't believe Henrik had been playing that good of golf. Like, a 13th place at Memorial, that is actually pretty good. Zurich, this was a team event, so that's not a huge deal. Anyways, what I'm trying to get at is strength of field wasn't very strong in 2018. There was no reason for some of the best golfers to come play this because it was a cut event. You know, let's say you finish outside top 5, you're not making a lot of money. Whereas if you go and you play this as a WGC event, you're going to make a lot of money. And that's why we don't see a lot of the golfers having even last year's stats or course history stats. So I would make the argument we get rid of, because it looks at the top 10 buckets here for last year, last week, we just remove this completely. Just remove 2019 and then reassess what the buckets look like, because it doesn't really apply. So when we do something like this, if we were to look at our anchor buckets, so actually let's go here, because we are just dropping 2019 altogether. We do have a few more buckets that show up, and I believe one of them is your last year 2s. Those are your top 20 golfers. So obviously you don't see that in 2019, but if we get rid of 2019, now our minimum becomes 2, finishing inside the top 10. So finding golfers that top 20 here last year, as well as having a course history inside that top 20, pretty good. I forget what other ones that were added. Perhaps you guys can see. I think maybe that was it just that one? Because we obviously talked about recent 1, recent 2s, recent form 1s, recent form 2s. Last week 1s we talked about. Last week 2s we talked about. Obviously we can't have that because there are 0 golfers in the bucket. And then we talked about last year 1s. So yeah, the only bucket that was added was last year 2s. So just want to throw that out there so you guys are aware of it and keep that in mind. I'm going to hit back a couple times because I want to bring back those numbers from that bucket. In the future, I'm hoping not to have to do this on spreadsheet and I can just be database. Like, I have a good idea how I'm going to create a database for the bucket system, and then we can adjust sliders and stuff like that to find, you know, like remove these sets of data to try to find what it would look like closer to condition wise. So anyways, let's go ahead and start building some lineups. We went through our anchor buckets. Why not, right? And really, I think what I'm going to start with is starting with our optimal lineup. So I don't bring the optimizer up a lot, primarily because it does a really good job at finding the next optimal lineup based off the rules that I select. Well, here's the thing. How it works on Excel is you have to put in constraints. So if I create a lineup, there's no way to say, hey, Excel, find the next optimal lineup without duplicating the one you just created. So there's no way of, at least I don't know. If you do, please let me know. Either, email me or put it in the comment section, but I can't figure out a way to do it. So I don't like to bring this up because the only way I can do a constraint without duplicating lineups is putting in a max ownership percentage. And really what it does is when I hit run optimizer, it's going to obviously give me the top optimal lineup. And then once I save this, it's not going to look at any 6 of these golfers because their ownership currently is going to be over what I set the max ownership to. So I hope you guys can see the flaw in that. When I do that, like the next optimal lineup, so let's say we save that and I run the next optimal lineup. Those 6 golfers won't show up unless I actually lock them in. So now we have 6 new golfers. Well, that might not be the optimal lineup. In fact, let me just delete all of these. Actually, hold on. If I look at the lineups here, all right. Actually, yeah, delete, run optimizer. We'll get those 6 golfers we just saw. I'm going to lock out the lowest scoring golfers. So that would be Ryan Palmer. He's scoring 748 points. Let me go lock him out. This would be what the next optimal lineup should be. And it would be adding Cameron Davis and Kevin Kisner. I don't think Kisner was in that other lineup, but either way, yeah, it changed up. No, we had Sung Jae still. We had Harris English. I think it did change those 2 guys out. But either way, this would be your next optimal lineup. But that's not how the optimizer works. It doesn't go here. I wish it did. I wish it created a bunch of them and then just gave me the top 50 optimal lineups with all of my ownership percentages in there. So you can see how it's skipping some, like it's not giving me the proper ownerships. Actually, I should say optimal lineups based off of ownerships. So it's flawed. Let's just put it, it's a long way of me explaining that this is flawed. But I do like using it to try to figure out, just the very first optimal lineup. And obviously, you already saw it on the screen, but let me just talk about it here. I may have frozen it. That would suck. Didn't like that I deleted the original just to come back to run it again, I'm sure. That's great. There we go. So Morikawa, McIlroy, Sung Jae Im, Harris English, Kevin Kisner, and Ryan Palmer. So yeah, Kisner was part of that last one, but we just added Cameron Davis. Yeah, I like this one. So this just shows me what the optimal lineup with no constraints is. So what if I say I want to find, let's make sure we have 2 course history 1 golfers in there, based off of what our anchor buckets were. So if I go ahead and put 0 here and just look. So course history 1s projecting around 3. Why not throw that in there? This is one constraint that I can do. So put in 3, run optimizer. It's going to find me 3 course history 1 golfers. It's a little bit lower as an optimal lineup than that previous one. But again, this optimizer is trying to find the most optimal lineup using all the constraints that it has. And really the only one it does is the $50,000 constraint. But either way, when we do that, now we get Morikawa, JT, Im, English, Kisner, and Phil Mickelson, which, gross. I'm not a huge fan of seeing Phil. I really don't care. But I also can go like this. I can lock in Xander. Give me the most optimal lineup with Xander Schauffele in it. So just finding that one lineup, this is a great way to do it. We have Sung Jae still. We have Harris. We have Palmer, Glover. And if you're sick of seeing Sung Jae, the better, one of the good things to do is just remove him from it. We can lock him out and try to build a lineup without Sung Jae, which now it brings in Garcia. So it's everything we've kind of already seen. It's Morikawa, Schauffele. Is this score better? No, 48.75 I think is what that first one was, right? I think it was 48.75. It'd be really weird if it was 48.57. A little dyslexic. But either way, I like it when it comes to this. So obviously we showed you the top, lineup. I like to sometimes go into this, look at our marquee tee time pairings, so go here. Like I said, this is what we were going to be doing this. Coming back to here, let me sort it by game. So really, what golfers do I want to anchor my lineups around? Well, we already saw the optimal lineup had Colin Morikawa and it had Rory in it. So like that already has it set for me. I absolutely love that. That's great. But let's say I don't want Morikawa. Let's put in Rory and how about Justin Thomas or Xander? We'll do both of those. So our top Rory and how about we just do Rory and Xander right away? See what the top guy is. I'm sure we're gonna see some of those same guys: Sung Jae, Harris English, Sung Jae, English, Kisner. So now it adds Cameron Davis. But how about this? Let's get rid of Sung Jae. I don't want to keep seeing Sung Jae. I also don't want to keep seeing. Actually, I do like Kevin Kisner. I do like Harris English. So get rid of them. Now we bring in Sergio. We have Cam Davis. I'm not a huge fan of Cam Davis. So again, we can keep doing this just to get rid of. And now we bring in Matt Jones and Tommy Fleetwood and Webb Simpson. So a whole new cast of characters. I like that. Xander, Rory, Webb, Fleetwood, Palmer, Jones. Not terrible. Honestly, not terrible. But I can also do the same thing and look for a good JT lineup to go with Rory, that is. And now we bring in Patrick Reed, which is super interesting. English, Garcia, and Na. Wow. Okay. That is extremely interesting. But obviously, if we bring in Sung Jae again, I'm sure he's going to be selected. Oh, he was not. Instead, it was Webb. Crazy. Okay, cool. I like Webb. This lineup is actually kind of fire. Like it's pretty good. And I can also include Na, or I could put Palmer in there instead of Na. And that's a pretty solid flip or pivot. So when it comes to the optimal lineups, I like that. There's one thing that I did that I haven't explained yet. And it's my exposure levels. So I look at the summary, which gives me max ownership. This is based off of the projections. So in each of these stat categories, so if I clear this and just look at our last year buckets, this is going to equal 10. But if I create 100 lineups, that means there's 600 positions available. This has to equal 600. So basically what it's doing is it's comparing this one, the projection, versus the rest of the buckets, and then it's multiplying it by 600. So it's going to give us a percentage, and when we multiply by 600, that's our max ownership. So these are like your max ownership points. So of all the golfers that are last year twos, I don't want it to go over 200. So basically what I ended up doing was when I look at last year twos, I'm trying to keep it under this exposure level. This is equals 209, by the way. I'm trying to keep it under the max ownership. And I try to do it with all the buckets. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it's just clunky. Because it might work for all my last year buckets, but as soon as I go into the course history, some of the golfers from one of these buckets is either going to go super high up or it's going to go super low, and it's either going to drop this number or it's going to raise it up quite considerably. So I haven't figured out how to make that one a smooth calculation, and I don't even know if it's that important, if I'm being honest. I would much rather just kind of use, I guess the max ownership, apply it to, what would be my max own guy based off that number, or provide max ownership levels off of that, if that makes any sense. Probably doesn't, but In my head, it does. In fact, I have this whole ownership thing right here where I'm looking at strokes gained buckets, course history buckets, recent form last year, last week. I have a summary here where it's pulling that data from. This is a copy from what I'm showing you on Google Sheets. And it's pulling that in here. It's giving me my minimum ownership percentages. It's giving me my maximum, median, and then average, basically, or the whatever's higher, median or average. And then I apply that to the exposure levels, and that's how I play my golfers. So I could hand build these lineups, by the way. Maybe I sort it like this and just say, okay, I want 25% DJ. So I do have a spreadsheet here that I can just click and drag. Should be 25. So that's 25. And I can do something like this and build out 25 lineups with DJ in it. You know, trying to mix up all of the things that I want to. I think this week what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually rely on the optimizer. And really, I already created lineups. That's why you saw all of those over there. So I can just go ahead and put those in here. You can see I made 90 lineups already. And then this column shows you all the ownerships. It selected 0% Jordan Spieth when it was creating lineups, it's crazy. Same applies with Tony Finau. I didn't tell the optimizer not to play these guys. It just didn't play them because it didn't find it optimal. Again, this is being worked off of my SweetSpot score, but it's also looking at the buckets these golfers belong to. So if it just doesn't make sense to play them based off those buckets, the optimizer is not going to select them. So just want to keep that, keep you guys in mind with that. So, but you can see based off of max ownership and ownership percentage, a lot of these just, they match, right? The optimizer liked them just as much as I liked them. Not so much with Brooks, obviously not so much with Jordan. As I scroll down through this, didn't like Finau. It didn't even like Finau, and I didn't even have to tell it not to like Finau. I didn't like Finau. The optimizer doesn't like Finau, so that works. And really, everything else kind of goes hand in hand. There isn't much to say. Like when we come down here in the 6K range, like seeing Lucas Herbert at 0%, that's not a big deal. Really, it's not a big deal. And a lot of these guys down here at 0%, also not a huge deal. So yeah, I do like seeing this, and that's why I kept it. I might toy around with it and put some minimum ownerships because I don't want to have 0% Jordan Spieth. But at the same time, I'm okay with out of 100 lineups just owning him 4 times. And then putting one of those lineups in kind of a high entry fee just to try to make some money off of them. But other than that, like, it's not that big of a deal to me. So anyways, that's all I wanted to provide in this video. I usually do create a bunch of hand-built lineups, but it also it sometimes, I would say, gets boring as an audience member. So when I rewatch it, I'm like, man, that didn't really work out. And when I hand build, it doesn't really work out because I'm talking to myself. Like, oh, do I want to select this guy? Do I want to select that guy? So I just decided to refrain from it and just use the optimizer. And I really don't mind because the optimizer at least can show you guys what a computer likes based off of the numbers I provided or the numbers that we went through. So either way, what we learned, obviously, when we look at, anchor buckets, marquee tee times, actually the marquee tee times obviously show you the pool of golfers you want to select 2 from. Hopefully not in the same pairing, but either way, should be a pretty decent start to begin with. And then from there, obviously, we looked at our anchor buckets, which there weren't a lot. We talked about 5 in total. Actually, we talked about 4 because one of them is 0. So we talked about 4. Actually, we did talk about 5 because we removed 2019 from the solution or from the numbers, and it popped open the last year 2s, which were your top 20s, just to remember that. So yeah, start building your lineups with golfers who did not play here last year. Again, we didn't have any 8K, 9K, or 10K golfers out of this bucket, so that's where you find your 7K golfers and 6K golfers. I'm projecting 2 golfers from that bucket, so I wouldn't select more than 2, really. You can, but don't do it frequently. Course history 1s, I'm projecting around 3.48. This is your golfers who have an average finishing position at this golf course dating back to 2013 between 1 and 20. Then it's recent form 2, recent form 1, and it's really your average finishing position over the last 8 weeks, somewhere between 40th place and 80th place. Obviously, it's split out into 20s, so 40 to 60, 60 to 80. I'm projecting 2 out of that 40 to 60 range. I'm selecting 1 out of that 60 to 80 range, and if I'm creating 100 lineups, I'm only trying to fill 60 positions of those 100 lineups with a golfer from that recent form 1. Just giving you guys kind of a heads up there. But yeah, I think that's a good place to start. Really, when it comes to building your lineups, I think it's a good strategy to deploy. If you do want the optimizer, let me know. I'll send it your way. Just give me a comment in the comment section. Obviously, like the video. Yeah, okay. So you got to be subscribed, like the video, comment, and then email me, because I can't email you. YouTube doesn't allow me to see your email address unless you just post it on your YouTube site. So yeah, just email me, SweetSpotDFS@gmail.com. Say, hey, I want this optimizer, and I'll send it your way. I'll add the dream sheet. It already has the summary in it, but I'll add the dream sheet to it. It's going to be easy. I'll just copy, well, obviously what we went over in the Google Sheets, and then you can have all this stuff. But I'm not going to give you my lineups. I'll remove that before sending it to you. And then you can do whatever you want with the ownerships. So yeah, that's all you got to do that. On Twitter, you can like the post, retweet it, and I'll reach out to you. You also have to be following me, but I can reach out to you and say, hey, what's your email address, so I can send it to you. But yeah, that's all you got to do if you want this optimizer. And I think that's going to be it. So tomorrow will be a new video. Basically, I'll go over my favorite PGA DFS picks. So it's just going to be for DraftKings, but it is the new partnership that I have with Prize Picks, where I go over my favorite Prize Picks plays of the week. And it's really just going to be of round 1, basically. But I'll give you kind of a good thought process going into the week. I've been pretty successful since starting playing Prize Picks. And hopefully we can continue that trend. And I mean, I think it's kind of easy. So I'll provide you my favorite picks and my strategies that I'll provide. That video should only be 15 minutes tops. So it'll be probably easier to digest other than these 1 hour long videos that I do with previews and strategies. But you can look forward to that tomorrow. That's all I have for you guys for today, though. So thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will see you in Prize Picks video tomorrow. All right, bye.